Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Dr. Price. Antoine Belton asks, "Hi, my name is Antoine. I've been a follower of your podcast for quite some time. Your videos are very informative, especially those involving Dr. Price. I think the work you two are doing is invaluable. I believe that you and Dr. Price have a live stream session maybe a week or so ago that I missed. I wanted to ask a question related to the Trinitarian doctrine, which may be a good topic for discussion in future videos. My question is, how much influence did Neo-Platonism have on this belief? I remember Philo of Alexandria being closely associated with Trinitarian theology along with Tertullian. I assumed they were the originators of this thinking. I've done a little research on Neo-Platonism, and it seems to center around this concept of the one. Seems like it could be interchangeable with the name Jesus. Plotinus looks to be a central figure around this thinking, along with many other philosophers. It appears that the Platonic tradition had an effect on Christianity, but I'm interested to see what you and Dr. Price have to say about it. Again, keep up and great work. I look forward to your response. Thanks."
Well, I think Philo did kind of map out the essence and the direction that would ultimately end up in Trinitarianism, because he believed that there was the God, which was sort of an abstraction, and he was a Middle Platonist, and he liked to allegorize the Bible to make it pretty much Platonic and Stoic, and he took the liberty to do this because he thought that Moses was the source from which Plato drew, and which was apparently common among some of the Christians and Jews back then, though historically it's absurd, but they didn't know that, they couldn't know that. But at any rate, it was an abstract view of God. And how did God create? Well, there's a coincidence between Genesis, which has God saying, "Let there be light, let there be this." And in other words, there were words or commands, debarim in Hebrew, same thing, word or command. And so that fit with the notion of the Logos, the word from ultimately from Heraclitus, a pre-Socratic. This notion was that of proportionality in the universe. What keeps things running on an even keel? Like, why do the seasons follow one another in the same order? When autumn comes, why do all the leaves not fall at the same time, but it's stretched out? Why does all the water in the world never freeze simultaneously? And why doesn't the world completely burn up sometime? Well, it can't, because there's this kind of regulating principle, the Logos. The Stoics borrowed this, and they said, well, the Logos is the essence of the god Zeus, whom they had abstracted. And of course, some Hellenistic Jews thought that Zeus and Yahweh were the same thing anyway. Some Jews now. The Epistle of Aristeas says that. Let's see. So Philo says, okay, God created by the Logos, which was pretty much the same as Sophia, or Chokhmah in Hebrew, the word, the wisdom of God that was with him in creation, and seems to have been thought of as an instrument of creation. You find that in the wisdom of Solomon, in Proverbs chapter 8, I think it is, and in Sirach and so forth. So what was, and then actually there were multiple instantiations of the Logos, or the Word. One sort of emanated the other, and that's kind of like Neoplatonism. But I want to get back to that in a moment. And so what was this Word, even if you just simplify it to one, and not the whole chain of them? Was it God, or was it something else? Like, this is already the question in the debate between Arius and Athanasius, which also had to do with the divine Logos through which everything was created. Was that of the same nature as God, or was it like God? In Greek, homoousios, of the same nature, or homoiousios, of like nature. So what was the answer Philo gave? Well, he didn't. He, as I understand him, he retreated into a kind of ambiguity that, and partly because he must not have wanted to deny monotheism. But the problem is, well, are you saying God did it? Which seems a little embarrassing almost, this transcendental deity. I mean, it's hard to get from that to Genesis, where Genesis 2, where God is making a guy like a sculpture out of clay, literally getting his hands dirty, having hands. And so, okay, God didn't exactly do it. Or who revealed the law on Mount Sinai? Whose finger was it on the plates? Well, God? Could God descend to that? Or was it an angel of God? Because even in Exodus, it speaks of it as an angel in the burning bush. So you don't want to say it's somebody other than God, but you don't want to make God a creature among creatures. As if he were the king of the gods or something. So he introduces a note of ambiguity that I think is central to the later Trinity. Are the three one? Well, in a sense they are, but they're not simply the same thing, as some would argue. Well, it's just one God showing himself in a different likeness or acting in a different mode. And now that's not good enough, because the threeness has to be integral to God. Otherwise, you're kind of making the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit into illusory manifestations, like in Hinduism. There's one divine being, Brahman, but he appears to worshippers in different faces: Vishnu, Shiva, Krishna, and so on. They're all God, but they're all like faces of God, or masks of God, like Joseph Campbell used to say. Okay, I want to return to who formulated the Trinity in a moment. Well, this isn't a bad time to do that, I guess. Tertullian was the first to speak of three personae in the Godhead, but we don't exactly know for sure what he meant. The current usage of persona, literally it was these masks that actors wore, like the smiling and the frowning when comedy and tragedy. Well, often the actors would hold up these masks. They just hold them. They wouldn't even wear them exactly, and that would tell you who they were supposed to be. So that was the persona, the image. So that doesn't settle the big question, the ontological question, but it kind of implies modalism: three modes, three roles, three faces. We don't know exactly what he meant, but that was a big stepping stone. Then 100 years or so later, 150 maybe, I forget, you have the three Cappadocian fathers. Cappadocia's in Asia Minor. This was Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, and Basil of Caesarea. They were old classmates and friends and kept in touch. They were major theologians, and they argued that there are three persons in the Godhead, and yet there's only one God, but the threeness is integral to the divine being. Irenaeus also had what was called economic Trinitarianism, which is modalism again, really. God acts in different ways. And so what do you do with the three? What are they? Are there, because on the one hand, the danger is tritheism. There are three gods, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And, well, they share one divine nature. Well, how real is that? In what sense is that real? I mean, I can say Larry, Moe, and Curly share the essence of stoogeness, but they're three different guys. It just means that they belong in the same category. It doesn't imply, and it's like a kind of formal unity, but not a material one. So you don't want to say that there are three gods. But what's the alternative? Is it modalism again? And people unwittingly commit heresy, quote unquote, when they try to explain the Trinity as like water, ice, and steam. You see, it's the same stuff chemically, but it can exist in three modes. That's heresy. That's modalism. And they say, oh no, it's like three light bulbs. They're all the source of the light that they share. Nah, that's tritheism. So what is the analogy then? There isn't any, because it's not a real concept. As the church fathers admitted, it's a mystery. And now this is not an absurd notion, but it's not exactly a notion at all. They're saying that these theories, like these models, if you will, tritheism and modalism, are inadequate attempts to grasp something so beyond human ken that you're oversimplifying it. You're essentially reducing it to an idol of a kind. And now I can see that if you said that, well, we're talking about the absolute infinite spirit. As in Isaiah, my ways are as above your ways as the heavens are above the earth. Yeah, I can see that. If that's the case, it's not a surprise we couldn't conceive it. Like, we don't even know what quasars are.
But isn't that a cop-out?
Well, I think it is. It's just, if you had good reason to believe such a thing, you could say, you could acquiesce and say, yeah, as the psalmist says, these things are too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. I understand. I mean, any worthy God, you would have to say that, or your mind is greater than God. So I understand it. It's not necessarily a cop-out, but it seems to me it ultimately is. And that what they've done, again, is to retreat into ambiguity. It can't really be modalism, but it can't be tritheism, so what is it? Well, we don't know. Now, to me, that is fatal, because even though, right, in one way, it's not absurd, in practice, what happens? If you pray to the Father and the Son and then to the Spirit, how is that not tritheism? I mean, I think you've got to have something in mind if you say, I believe in the Trinity, or are you just speaking in tongues? Do you have anything in mind? You would think so. If I say I believe 1492 Columbus crossed the ocean blue, I know what I have in mind there. Or if I think so-and-so political party will ruin the country if they're elected, I know what I mean. I could be wrong, but it's a conceivable sort of a thing. But here, what are you talking about? What is it you believe? It's like, I believe in what's that again? You can't hold it in your head, so there's nothing to believe here.
You know, that reminds me, do you remember that movie Army of Darkness?
I've never seen it.
Oh, you've got to watch it. There's a part where he gets somehow launched back because he opens up the Necronomicon he shouldn't have had, and it launches him back into medieval times, and now he has a shotgun too when he ends up back then, and he has fight these demons. There's real monsters in this movie, and there's corpses coming in, the night of the living dead's coming to life and all that. Well, in this war, he's going to try and like stop it all, and he has 3 words he has to remember: Neptu, Naraka, and then he has the 3rd word, and he goes up to enchant, and all he has to do is remember these 3 words. The sorcerer, or whoever, the wizard's like, do not forget the words. And he's like, okay. He gets there finally to the place, and this is it. The book is opened, and he's like, Neptu, Naraka. And he's like, no. And then the ground starts to shake, and he's like, I said it. Good. And then the demons start coming, and he's like, I said your stupid words. Sorry, I had to.
Yeah,
put that
throat
in.
clearing. That's kind of what I think it is. You're obfuscating, and so it could be a great profundity, but it could just be a bad theory. And in the absence of any good reason to believe this, I mean, we know there are quasars. We don't know enough to say what they are. But we don't know that there's a Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And when you start looking at plausible explanations for where they came from, it seems to me, like Nietzsche says, that that if you can trace the evolution of something, you can no longer take it for granted that it simply exists. I think that's the case. You can easily see how Jesus, the Son, is supposed to be different from the Father, but people wanted to worship Jesus, but they also wanted to be considered monotheists, so they had to somehow patch them together. And then the Holy Spirit. I have a PhD in systematic theology. I cannot understand where this comes from or what it's supposed to mean. Because in the vast majority of instances in either testament, the Spirit is an it. It's like the medium for the exercise of divine power. And there's 1 or 2 places where metaphorically it's ascribed personality, like don't grieve the Spirit of God. But that's a little tenuous to say, oh, yeah, see, the personality of the Holy Spirit. It just seems that somehow somebody thought this was a loose end that had to be tied up. But what or who is the Holy Spirit? And it just seems to me that's so artificial, it's just obviously spurious. And so it seems to me there's no reason to believe this. Now, the Hindu triad, if you want to call it, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, that was an ecumenical compromise because the 2 great gods in Hinduism still today are Vishnu and Shiva, who have no real connection. They're different pantheons, and each regards their patron deity as the ultimate. And then Brahma, the creator, was apparently dominant in an earlier time, and for some reason they put him in there, and they've rigged it up so that it's Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. This isn't a trinity, because though there are 3 of them, it's backed up by non-dualism. The idea is that Brahman, spelled slightly differently, is the featureless divine essence with no definition or differentiation. It's sometimes called Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss, and those are just, as Job says, the edges of his ways. We even that is a matter of the refraction of the pure light of Brahman through the limiting conditions, as they call it, like light being broken up into the colors of the rainbow because of the rain droplets that act as prisms. That's kind of why it seems to us that there are different people, different things, etc., or different gods. Ultimately, it's all Brahman, but we can't see it till we're enlightened. So this triad, the Trimurti doctrine, the 3 images, is like modalism, basically. It's not Trinitarianism. So what have we got here? They do solve the problem this way. Okay, we're coming down on the modalistic side. on a popular level, they're simply polytheists. They believe in hundreds of deities, though more philosophical ones would say, no, these are also relatively illusory manifestations, almost like the different virgin apparitions in Catholicism. Now, with Neoplatonism, this seems to me to be more like Hindu non-dualism. It says ultimately there is the one, and it seems to mean pretty much the same thing as far as I can tell as Brahman. On a lower level, it's kind of like a fountain of being, and from the one emanates the two. You now, if you could perceive it, you could see like Jung spoke about this. He said that only on the second level, where one has given rise to two, can you have dualities like good and evil, light and shadow, and so on. But then as more of them emanate, you have a whole world of illusory diversity. I mean, it's good enough for us. We're on that level, but that's what it is. That any difference is not ultimately real, and Plotinus had a couple of important disciples. One was Origen of Alexandria, the great church father, not Saint Origen, by the way, because later they considered him a heretic, and Valentinus, the greatest of the Gnostics. And Plotinus didn't believe in Gnosticism because he couldn't accept the notion that matter was evil, as the Gnostics thought. But there's obviously a huge relation between Neoplatonism and Gnosticism. Let's see. So Neoplatonism doesn't really get you out of the bind Trinitarianism puts you in, because you're still kind of dealing with modalism as far as I understand it. And it's just that the one differentiates into two, not three, I guess, but on a lower level of being. And we're way down there. Again, that's not bad in Neoplatonism. It is in Gnosticism, the value judgment. But it seems to me that Philo, a Middle Platonist, that is Plato and his school being the original thing, and then Middle Platonism with Philo and others, and which combined some Aristotle and Stoicism, and then Neoplatonism a bit later with Plotinus. So they're all playing ball in the same park, but I don't think it's Trinitarianism is a direct outworking of Neoplatonism. But they're all relevant to that question, and it's one of the most important theological questions.
Interesting. Makes me think of, like we've talked about, how doctrines, if you're going to accept multiple groups and you're going to create doctrines to kind of nail, or we're going to put a final seal on the whole totality of what we have, I guess if something was contradictory, yet you're trying to seal the deal by bringing in, well, you like that, we like this, let's make it all work, then technically you could take something that logically won't make sense or is a technical contradiction, unless you want to say it's a mystery, and then explain why your contradiction's there. That could be why they had come up with a doctrine like that, kind of like preterists do today. Why do people still believe that Jesus hasn't come? The final end hasn't happened. Well, he said he was coming in the first century. He said it over and 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 over. It was supposed to end. Everything was supposed to happen. Why did the church still go? Why are they still waiting? Well, because a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. Oh, okay. So you can find places that teach what you like, and then you can find places that teach what you don't like, but you got to make those formulate to what you like. Vice versa. Well, preterists do it in the opposite direction. However, if you have both, what do? Well, he came in a shadow form in the first century, but the real end is not yet. It hasn't quite happened. So there's an explanation. I wonder if the same thing with the doctrines here are, you have some that believe he was just a man or something like that, some who believe he was demigod-like, some who say he was the Father himself, or right there, one with God himself. And so you had to find a way to somehow split it up. I don't know if the Trinity answers that, but...
Well, in a way, it is. You're trying to get together monotheists and Jesus worshippers by saying, well, they're kind of the same thing, but only kind of. The diversity of beliefs, by the way, there's a real great modern analogy with a Pentecostal faith healer from the 1950s, William Marion Branham, who created quite a stir at the time. He was hinting pretty broadly that he was the precursor for the second coming. He had arguments like, well, I don't know where he got this, but this new herald of the second coming, whoever he was, would have a name similar to Abraham, and his name was Branham and so forth. And hey, his name. Well, so that's apparently what he thought he was, a pretty exalted position. And he did think it would be any time. But others of his disciples thought that wasn't good enough and said, I think Branham is the second coming of Christ. And others said, no, he is a new incarnation of God in his own right. Well, I don't think Branham hinted at the latter too, but they just couldn't control themselves. And or Rabbi Schneerson, the Rebbe of the Lubavitcher sect of Hasidim, once he died, you had various of his followers say that he's God incarnate, and that or others said, oh, just the Messiah. This, you almost have to. In fact, that's a great modern parallel that Bultmann didn't live long enough to see, because he figured Jesus had predicted the coming of the Son of Man and had no thought of it being him. But when he died and people had visions of him, they said, I get it. Jesus is or has now become the Son of Man. And when the Son of Man comes, it'll be him. Well, that's just what happened with Rabbi Schneerson. He said the Messiah's on his way, and his disciples began saying, I bet it's him.
What about, is that after his death they were saying?
No, even they thought before he died
wow.
that he's going to reveal himself. He never did. But after he died, they began to say, yeah, he is, and he's coming back. So similar.
Join our Patreon